Welcome to Conversations with Big Rich. This is an interview-style podcast. These interviewed are all involved in the off-road industry. Being involved, like all of my guests are, is a lifestyle, not just a job. I talk to past, present, and future legends, as well as business owners, employees, media, and land use warriors. Men and women who have found their way into this exciting and addictive lifestyle we call off-road. We discuss their personal history, struggles, successes, and reboots. We dive into what drives them to stay active in off-road. We all hope to shed some light on how to find a path into this world that we live and love and call off-road. This episode of Conversations with Big Rich is brought to you by the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. The mission of the Hall of Fame is to educate and inspire present and future generations of the off-road community by celebrating the achievements of those who came before. We invite you to help fulfill the mission of the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. Join, partner, or donate today. Legends live at ORMHOF.org. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, I get a chance to interview a friend of mine. He's an off-roader, an adventurer, photographer, a writer, 2015 Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame inductee, Chris Collard. And Chris, it is so good to finally nail you down and get you on the phone for this interview. And I want to say thank you so much.
Well, I'm just glad to be here. I'm excited to be here. We've been talking about this for quite a while, and schedules were always conflicting. So, yeah. This is going to be fun.
You're a busy man traveling all over the world, and we're going to get to that. But first, the first question is, where were you born and raised?
Well, there's a few different answers.
Okay.
I was born in Harbor City Hospital in Long Beach. But we moved around a little bit. I'd say that in my younger years, I grew up in North County, San Diego. So it's a place called Solana Beach.
Okay.
And loved that. But then we moved up to Northern California, Rockland, outside of Sacramento, just before high school. So, and I hated it. I'm like, as soon as I'm 18, I'm moving back to the beach. And we lived in a tent, actually, on a friend's ranch for like 3 months during the summer. My folks had a little 13-foot trailer. My sister and I lived in a tent while my dad started to build our first house. So, yeah. Southern California, but it was a good place.
So up until about high school, you said, what was it about Southern California that you loved so much? You growing up on the beach, did you surf? What was it?
Yeah, the beach wasn't bad. I mean, with my friends that went to high school, they had surf PE. It was the first class of the day. So when we moved up on this ranch, I learned how to milk goats. So there were, motivations to move back. I never did that, but
from surfing to milking goats.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was a total ag community back then.
Right.
But my dad, I mean, going back into the '60s, yeah, him and his buddies, they were into cars, and then they got into motorcycles, and they got into dirt bikes. And so, moving into the mid '60s, they were out racing around in places like Mojave, a place called Holiday, which was up towards Lancaster area, on old English bikes, Montesas, Greaves, Voltacos, Italian bikes. And so I think when I was 5, my dad got me a little Honda 50 motorcycle and one of the little mini bikes, and, put me on it and pushed me off, and probably hit the dirt a few times, and he picked me up and pushed me off again. So I kind of grew up out there riding motorcycles. When we lived in San Diego, we moved down to Solana Beach, and the desert was a little bit further away, but Baja was very close. So then we started going to Baja, San Felipe area, and south of Ensenada down towards San Quintin. And so the world was a big place. I had a blessed childhood because my dad and my parents liked to do stuff, whether it was backpacking up in the Eastern Sierra or riding dirt bikes or camping. It's like we were always, like, the weekends came and we were doing something.
Awesome.
So, yeah, it was good.
And
I was very lucky.
So school-wise, those early years, do you remember much of that? What kind of student were you? or were you more interested
Uh,
in what happened on the weekends?
I was more interested in what was going to happen on the weekends. I wasn't a great student. In fact, I wasn't a good student until I actually got out of high school. I went to college because I went to college on my own recognizance, I suppose. Nobody was telling me to do it. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to go to college, and I actually learned that I wasn't that stupid after all. I mean, I got crappy grades in school, and uh, but yeah, I've looked at my life like this. Like my 20s were way better than my high school years, and my 30s were better than my 20s and the 40s and so on.
Just keeps getting better.
So yeah, in my opinion, yeah, I mean, I've had a blessed life. Done some crazy, amazing things. I was talking about my dad and riding motorcycles. My dad got wind of, well, yeah, this new race that they were going to have that went from Barstow to Vegas on motorcycles. It was like a smoke bomb scramble. And my dad got his Grease 250 and he raced the first speed to beat. So we grew up in the dirt.
Nice.
Playing in the dirt. If I have to send you a picture for like the thumbnail for this podcast,
Right.
It might be a picture of me when I was about 5, sitting in a big hole of dirt with my legs out, my arms out that we dug and just playing out in the Mojave Desert somewhere.
Perfect. So, what was your dad doing down in Southern California that all of a sudden decided to move, from the off-road mecca basically in Southern California and going down to Baja to Rockland?
Well, he was he was in business,
Okay.
and he was a plumbing contractor, and he started building homes in Solana Beach, but he's also a little bit claustrophobic in the not about being in small rooms, but in like the crowds. Even this, we're talking about the 70s. And he says Solana Beach just started getting so crowded. They were building everywhere, and like, I think same reason we moved out of the Los Angeles area. Before that is because he's like, yeah, claustrophobic. It's just too, he grew up in Whittier. He's like, there are no more fields. There's no more trees. It's a concrete jungle. I'm not going to raise my kids here. And then we moved to San Diego, and then he looked around and decided to do it again, and ended up here in Northern California.
Okay. Interesting. He was a contractor then.
Yeah, his brother had a commercial plumbing shop, and then his brother moved to Oregon, and he continued with the commercial plumbing and started building homes, spec homes, and that became his thing.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so you went to high school in the Rockland area.
I did.
Did you change from, did you start getting involved with 4-H or FFA or something like that?
No, I was a dork. I was a dork in high school, and I don't know if things have ever changed, but like I played some sports. I wrestled, played baseball. All growing up, and actually played on the tennis team for 2 years, and then I turned 16. And I got my driver's license, and then the focus was getting a car. So I pretty much dropped sports. I mean, my folks didn't buy me a car. That wasn't going to be in the card. So it's like, I'm like, okay, I had a car I could drive for a while until I could save my own money. But yeah, it was all about getting a hot rod.
And what did you do to save money for buying a car?
I worked since I was, could walk probably. So even when, I was, third grade, I was picking up mails on the job for my dad. I was cleaning job sites, paper routes. We had avocado trees, so I'd pick wheelbarrows full of avocados and roll them down to the main road and sell them, make money. And yeah, I was a thrifty little kid. So, and when my dad was a builder, I learned how to frame. So I was 16, I got a job on a framing crew building apartment buildings. And I lived at home. I mean, all I had to pay for it was my gas and insurance to drive. So it wasn't too hard to save money.
So what was that first car that you got?
Well, I know you're going to appreciate this. Maybe some of our younger listeners might not, but it was a Chevy Vega.
A Vega, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. right?
Yeah, there you go.
But it wasn't just any Vega.
Okay.
It was 71. It had a 354 volt main, Muncie M21 M22 rock crusher transmission. Monza posi rear end, had this Hirsch vertical gate. Remember the drag racing vertical gate shifters, with a
Yeah.
little side lever for reverse. It was yellow, had the coolest slot mags you could, I mean, that's what everybody had to have, slot mags.
Right.
And an L88 hood, and it was way too much horsepower for a 16-year-old kid. I just tell you that. I'm lucky I survived that car.
That's amazing that still living under the roof of your parents, that they would okay a car like that, even though it's your own money. I mean, I understand, but was it because your dad was a car guy?
No, he wasn't a car guy. He's still alive. He's not a car guy. But I think I must have wore them down. What I really wanted, I wanted a vintage, early Camaro. And we didn't call them vintage back then because it was talking about the late 70s.
Right.
I wanted like a Z28 or an RS, and I found one. It was $1,800. And RSSS blue with the white stripes, and it was pop-up headlights. It was awesome, but it was $1,800, and I only had $1,300. My dad would not loan me the money for that car because he didn't want me to have a hot rod. And then I found this Vega, and it was $1,300, and I had the money, and I guess he finally just threw his hands up. And
that's awesome. Yeah, I wanted to buy a God, what was it? It was a Datsun 510, I think is what it was. And or that style, kind of a road racer, little boxy road racer. And
I had four-wheel independent suspension. Those things were high rides.
Yeah. And I didn't have the money for the one I found. It was $600. I had three. I was 14 years old, and same thing. My parents said, nope. And I had just started working in a shop, sweeping floors and that kind of stuff, and doing odd jobs, the easy stuff. And then my dad's best friend, he was kind of like an uncle to me. He had this 54 Volkswagen Bug that he goes, well, I'll sell you this Bug that I have for $300. And I was like, sold. So it was the old,
wheels.
oval window, had the turn signals that came up in the doorpost, all that kind of stuff. It was, it had a 25 horsepower,
like 1200 cc or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it was, and he was the second owner. He bought it used in Germany when they were in the service over there, and he brought it back. But that was 1972. Yeah, 72. Yeah.
So VW Bugs were notorious for freezing your feet in the wintertime, but the ones that were European spec, they had a gasoline heater in the front that actually ran off of gas from the tank. Very dangerous. But did your Gears have that?
Mine did not have that. But I knew it was a German model because it had the turn signals.
Yeah. I had a Baja Bug at one time, and it had that. It was a European spec car, and it had that gasoline heater in the front.
Nice. No, I just made sure. So I put these 12-volt electric motors on there, blowers, and so that we could have defrosters. The main thing was that, because otherwise it was ice scraper on the inside and lots of towels trying to get up to the ski resorts and back down. But, that's that it didn't matter. It was a fun car to drive. So your Vega with a 4-bolt 350, huh?
Yeah. And it was a Rex Hutchinson motor.
Oh, wow.
Had 11.5 to 1 pistons, and it was like it would burn up starters and just, it was a challenge to keep it running. But, and like I said, it was my hot rod days go. All my buddies had, GTOs and Z28s and Mustangs, and it was the hot rod days. We raced out by the trust fall out on Roseville Road, middle of the night. There's nothing out there. Lucky I survived that car. I ended up wrecking it. And getting on the freeway, hit some water, thought I was going to pass my friend. I mean, I could, on the freeway at like 60 miles an hour. I mean, it was packing pretty good, but all I had to do was like stand on the skinny pedal and break the rear tires.
Right.
It was
Nice.
just squirrely.
So what after you wrecked that one, what did you end up in?
Oh, no more hot rods.
No more hot rods.
No.
Huh?
Yeah, I got a Dodge Challenger 71.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm thinking, you're going to get, when you say Dodge, I think, okay, you're getting a Dodge Aspen family car. No.
No. Dodge Challenger, yellow, Kragers, BFG, TA radials, which were like the coolest new tires coming out.
Yep.
And, of course, chrome traction bars. But it was, it looked like hot rod, but it wasn't. It had a 318 two-barrel automatic. I love that car. It's just awesome car to drive, though. But I became a much more cautious driver. Even at 16, we had, a number of kids in my high school that ran out of talent, died. And I realized how close I was to doing that. I mean, I spun it, getting on the freeway, went across 3 lanes of traffic, hit the divider. And I got out of the car and there were like semis going by. And I was like, holy moly. It got my attention.
Well, that's amazing that it got your attention and you took heed of the warning.
Yeah.
I have to admit that I went through many wrecks and or close calls, death-defying situations until I guess it would have been right around 2009 when I met Shelley that I started to curb my enthusiasm for trying to die.
No, I still like to go fast, but I'm just, the right place and the right time,
Right.
Yeah. And I realized it's like, man, I just wrecked this car that I loved. It's like, I don't want to wreck the next one. It cost me a lot of money.
So when you were growing up, did you have certain aspirations of what you wanted to be?
I did. I wanted to be an astronaut.
Oh.
Yeah.
But you sucked at school.
Well, I did, and that was going to be a slight problem. Yeah. Apparently astronauts have to be pretty sharp dudes. And then when I was in 4th grade, actually, my good friend, his dad was the commander of an aircraft carrier. His name was Robert Pearl. So Vietnam era. And when they were in port, my entire 4th grade class was able to go down, walk around the aircraft carrier, jump in an F floor, and I was like, I think I want to fly planes. That's what I want to do. But apparently I wasn't that focused.
Right.
Yeah. I did later on pursue that. I did pursue it when I finally went to college on my own. I actually got good grades, and I talked to some recruiters, and they basically, the Air Force recruiters, and this is before Top Gun came out, right? So, and they were like, engineering degree is going to be a better option for if you actually want to fly. And so I changed my major, spent 2 years in calculus, differential equations, materials, and all that stuff. And then I realized that the Air Force was not going to take me at all, at least not to fly, because I was born with my left arm, the radius and my ulnus are fused together.
Oh, wow.
So there's no axial rotation in my left arm. And most people don't notice it. I've lived with it all my life, so I don't really think about it. But the Air Force was like, yeah, you're never going to see the front of an airplane. A little frustrating at the time. Actually, it was really frustrating. And I was like, you know what? F you guys, and heck with all this. Like, I basically quit school, leased out my house, and rented an apartment over a shop at a country airport, and started flying on my own. And it's like, I was working at UPS at the time, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to save my money and fly, and I'll just pay my own way and get my commercial endorsement that way. So I eventually did get to that, but yeah, roundabout kind of way.
So UPS, were you the man in brown making deliveries?
I was the man. Yep, darn tootin'. I was the guy. Started there. I started working there at night, in college with night shift. And that was actually the time that I ended up taking a job as a driver because I put it on because I thought, it's going to wait. I'm going to finish school, and then I got a little bit teed off with the Air Force and other things. So I basically bailed out of college after a couple of years and took a full-time job as a driver. Yep. Right about the time that Wall Street Journal and all the magazines were talking about the UPS guys were the world sex symbols, and women would drag them into their houses.
So was that accurate?
Yeah, that's a side conversation, but no. What it did, it's caused a whole bunch of guys a lot of grief because their girlfriends and their wives are like, "Oh, is that what you're doing on your lunch?" You're like, oh, come on. It's media. They're gonna, if it bleeds, it leads. They're gonna, Anyway, no.
Okay, so you went from hot rods to big brown racers.
I did. Living at an airport and flying planes just about every other day.
Awesome.
So it was fun.
And
good chapter.
Did you end up buying an airplane, your own airplane?
No. I was part of an aero club.
Okay.
So they had about 25 different aircraft, ranging from a Piper Cub to a really cool old biplane. I was never certified on that plane, but just stuff, fixed wing stuff.
So, question now: do you still have your pilot's license and you maintain it?
I do not.
Okay.
Nope. I haven't been active in 20 years.
Okay.
So about 20 years. Now the only thing I'm flying these days is a drone. So
a drone?
I am
okay.
licensed. I am licensed to fly a drone.
There you go. That was a challenging course to take, right?
It's a no-brainer. I mean, when they first came out with that Part 107, you were actually required to be a pilot. So I actually went back down to the Auburn airport, and I was going to get checked out so I could get my drone license. And just about that time, then they lifted that requirement. It was a crazy requirement, but I'm like, hey, I need to get in this thing early. And then they lifted it, so it made it really simple. It's just ground school.
Right.
So, yeah.
So when I know that when I met you, I believe, which was in the early 2000s, was it? I remember you coming up to one of our We Rock, or back then Cal Rock.
Cal Rocks.
Right, and shooting.
Lake Amador.
Was
I think
it Amador?
It was your first event. It was your first event, I think.
Yep, it was.
Yeah.
Okay, 2001.
Yeah. I came up and I got that for, I think for Peterson's maybe.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that is when we met. You bet.
And you weren't working for UPS at that time, were you?
No.
Okay.
No, I there had a lot of stuff that happened between the hot rod days, but yeah, working at UPS, I didn't get my commercial license. I got kind of sidetracked buying houses.
All right.
And that took quite a bit of investment. So I just flew, privately, and decided that was going to be my outlet for being a pilot, just to be private. But went through the hot rods, went through the VW bikes, and then I got my dream truck at the time was a Toyota 4-wheel drive. Old Hilux first gen.
Right.
And I bought that in 83, and just kind of got into the 4-wheel drive things. And I learned how to drive, on the rocks up on the Rubicon because it's our backyard. And all kinds of stuff happened. I don't know. We didn't know each other back then in the 90s, but
probably came across each other.
We probably did. But a friend of mine and I were the ones that designed the first compact 2-speed underdrive transfer case for the Toyota. Okay.
Wow.
And a lot of people might be going, what are you talking about? This guy smoking crap. Well, in December of 93, 4-Wheeler printed a little postage stamp picture of these guys from Iceland that were basically the Arctic truck guys. And it had a picture of this transfer case, and it was basically a Chevy 350 adapter from Advanced Adapters, flipped around backwards, and then they made it thin, like an inch billet adapter plate to mount it to another gearbox, because the total transfer case splits. It's like it's got the gear reduction portion and it's got the output portion. And a buddy of mine who was a Toyota tech and owned a couple of repair shops, we'd been bugging Jim Sickles at Downey, the guys at Partridges at Advance, the guys at Northwest, about gearing options for the Toyota, because there was nothing other than like ring and pinions. And we'd already done that and broke that. So we saw this thing and we're like, that's brilliant. And nobody was doing anything. We found out that Marlin was starting to import these things from Iceland. But Drew and I just were like, you know what? Let's just put $5,000 each on the table and make something. And what we came up with after stripping, we were doing a couple of prototypes in different sizes and models. We realized that you could take the Toyota transfer case has a long shaft inside. It's got a gear on one end, it holds a bearing, and it basically is your output shaft. But we realized that you could cut that just past the gear reduction portion, bore it out, hog it out, rebroach it, reharden it, or make it whole new gear. And then you've got this very, very short gearbox. So we made a 2 1/8 inch 6061 billet plate for. We had a friend that was an aerospace machinist, and we came up with this little gearbox. It was like just over 6 inches long. All at the same time, Marlin was coming out with his, which was about 11 inches long. And we actually ended up at the same show at Sierra Trek with booths, and I knew who he was, but I don't think he knew who we were. And he came over and he was just like, I think I felt bad because he had just done his first production run. And he was just like, oh man, this is really not good. I'm like, what do you mean? Anyway, we had this conversation, and it's funny because I didn't know him at the time. Since that, I mean, we didn't start that thing to make it this, huge long running business. We just were going to do it for ourselves. And by the time we were done, there's like 100 people that were just like handing us $1,000. Like, we want one. And we're like, guess we're going to make more of these things.
Right.
And so anyway, we got out of it because neither one of us wanted to stand at trade shows. We did, Easter Jeep Safari and some other events, but neither one of us had really wanted to turn it into a long-term business. So we sold the rights to manufacture to a guy named Jack O'Brien. And then Marlon and I, since then, we were always at events together, and we ended up becoming pretty good friends. And everybody knows that he passed away, but it was like,
yes,
that guy was, we were like neck and neck, teeth on teeth at competitors for a while. But then, I think I realized, man, this guy is a really good guy, and like, I remember hearing of him like dropping everything at 2 a.m. and driving up to help somebody up on a trail 200 miles away.
Exactly.
So that was just like another little chapter in my 4-wheel drive weird kind of life. And that was in the mid 90s. So
okay. So then let's take it from there, and let's get into the from UPS. I know when I met you, I thought you were doing mortgage broker.
I was.
Okay.
That was a transition job to pay bills.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was between UPS and becoming a world famous adventure photographer.
Well, I took the job at UPS for kind of a goal, and that was to start flying. And then it got sidetracked, and before I knew it, like 13 years went by.
Right.
And I happened to be the UPS driver in Georgetown for Mark Smith in the Jeep Jamboree USA. And I started, this guy's into four-wheeling. I started working around the country on events with Mark and Merlin. And I remember on a flight, Mark had upgraded me to a first class seat with him, and we're flying somewhere back east. And he's just querying me. He's hitting me up. He's like, what are you doing? What are your dreams about? You're going to be you like being a UPS driver? And I shared, it's like, no, I'm just kind of here. And my dream is like to quit and be a photographer. Not necessarily a writer, but to be a photographer. And, I think you knew Mark Smith, but he just kind of looks over. He's like, well, damn it, kid. He goes, get off your ass and do it. Nobody's going to do it but you. And I kind of felt about 2 inches tall in that first class seat. I was like, damn, got a point. And I had another friend of mine, one of my best buddies, Jody. Every time he'd see me, he was like Mr. Creative. He was creative guy, always jumping around doing all kinds of different stuff, automotive related, paint related, fiberglass, stucco, an artist. And every time he'd see me, we were good friends. He'd see me and he's like, "Oh, buddy, how you doing?" Pat me on the back. And he's like, "How's a big brown piece of shit truck? It's like 140 degrees in there." And he's like, "You are wasting your life." And between Jody and Mark Smith, it's like I finally had the guts to jump off the bridge, and I will always be thankful to both of those guys. Yeah.
Were you married at that time?
I was not.
Okay.
I was not married. I had no kids. I had, saved enough money for like 2 years of expenses. I had a house. I had roommates in the house, so my cost of living was very low. And I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna figure out how to make it work. And just started, trying to shoot everything I could find and talk to every magazine that would talk to me. Find events like Cal Rocks out in Lake Amador. I'm like, yeah, oh, great, I'll be there. I'll shoot it. And I kept getting calls back for more content, and it was just, yeah.
And so you were self-trained photographer?
I had no formal training in photography. That's correct.
Okay.
I didn't go to Brooks. I learned how to take pictures. I learned how to make camera.
Didn't go to Art Center?
No, Art Center. I learned how to take pictures, black and whites in a oatmeal cardboard oatmeal canister. Remember those? You poke a hole in it, aluminum foil, and you crack your foam up.
Yeah.
That was my formal training in photography. But when I did that, I went down to Barnes and Nobles, and I wanted to shoot for the Geographic. I thought, okay, I know I was in the off-road, and I thought I could try to do some stuff in off-road. But I thought, I wanted to shoot for the Geographic, and I bought a book called The Business of Nature Photography by a guy named John Shaw, and had some very, very good points in it. The ones I picked up on were that if you want to sell a picture, like the world has changed. It's like very few magazines are going to send out a writer and a photographer anymore. So if you want to sell a great picture, you need to sell it with a great story. That means you got to learn how to write.
Yep.
And vice versa. And the tough thing was English was my least best subject in school. I could not. No. English, I wouldn't even want to see some of the things I wrote in the early days, but I realized I'm like, that's just a very valid point. So I went back to school. I went back to English classes, grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, English lit, whatever I needed to do to learn what the difference was between a colon and a semicolon. And it's like, okay, well, I'm committed to doing this. I'm going to sink or swim. So
that's what editors are for.
Well, I became an editor.
Very good.
Yeah. The early days, I was shooting whatever features I could find. I was shooting events like yours and early ARCA events down, the ARCA finals in Farmington, I think it was 99. Had a unique opportunity to go to South America on a Jeepers Jamboree trip in 1998. So I just, I was scraping together every possible content that I could, everything I could write and shoot. and practiced by submitting, articles to my 4-Wheel Drive Club newsletter every month. Not heavy circulation, but and then the Cal 4 Wheels and Gear magazine, I started writing stuff for them. It's just like I gotta get stuff out there, and I gotta learn this business.
Right. And who would you say was your biggest influence during those times?
Well, I had, Rich, I have had some great mentors, and we're actually still very good friends. One of them was Stu Mead.
Yes.
And I know you know Stu. I think Stu's been on your show.
Yep, absolutely.
And Rick Payway.
Okay.
Yep. So, I saw Stu at Easter Jeep Safari, and I'm like, hey, that's Stu Mead. And I made my way up there, introduced myself, and figured she'd probably want to blow me off or something. But she's like, oh, that's awesome. Good for you. It's like, here's my card. Call me anytime. And we ended up having all kinds of long conversations, great information about business. And we're still friends. We traveled in South America on the same team at the Dakar Rally. I put on a project in Australia in 2019 and brought Sue in as one of my journalists. So it's good people. And Rick Payway, same thing. If you're out there and you want to learn how to write, it's like, send it to Rick. And if you're lucky, he will redline everything he doesn't like. He'll send it back to you instead of redlining it, and you'll never see it until it goes to print. But he would send it back to me, and I'm like, Rick, what's the matter with this? He's like, okay, it goes like this. Blah, 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 blah. Nobody cares. Hey, delete it. Yeah, I'm like, what? Because nobody gives a rat's ooey about that. I was like, get to the meat and potatoes. Tell a story. Like, you don't need, all this other little verbiage in and out of it. But, so I always appreciated Rick's very candid input on what I sent him. And later, years later, when I was the editor of Overland Journal, some people, you'd look at him and you're like, okay, you know what? This guy actually can tell a story. He just needs some help with X, Y, and Z, whether it's working on composition of photographs or, just writing style. It's like, unless you're telling me that you had a goanna tail on a stick for breakfast, nobody cares what you had for breakfast. If you had pancakes with syrup and you're in the middle of Mongolia, who cares? It's like, tell us that you had yak milk and, something exciting.
Right.
So those were kind of those lessons. Yeah. So there's Rick and Sue were two of them.
Yeah, we try to tell people is that want to write or submit stories to us is that, we want it written in your words and about your adventure. Not don't try to make it, Hemingway style or anything like that. Just tell your story. And if they're serious about continuing to do it, then we'll help them. Otherwise, Shelley just goes through and makes the edits. And, if they ask, then we let them know why, what we did. But the main thing is getting that story in that first person. It's hard for somebody to read a story in a second or third person. Well, so-and-so said this, that kind of thing. So.
Oh, yeah. That was one of the things that drove me nuts about. I'm sorry, we're getting on sidetracked here, but about like some of the 4-wheeler prime media publications, like they wanted you to write in the third person. It's like, no, this is a very first person thing. I was in the middle of Malaysia, to my waist in mud, pulling a winch line, and in the middle of the night. And it's like, how do I say we? I'm like, no, it's me. I'm standing here dragging this cable, and there's like scorpions and creepy crawling things all over the place. Like, tell the story. I fought them for years on that.
Exactly. But I find that's what people really want to hear, though. They want to hear the story, especially nowadays.
They do.
Because they want to feel that experience that you had. And the only way they're going to get that is by you telling it in your words.
Right.
In that first person.
Yeah, you got to put them in the seat.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to put them in the seat next to you, or on the back of the horse with you, or whatever you happen to be doing. Riding a camel across Morocco. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's what good storytellers do, is they make you feel like you're there. I mean, people want to feel, and you gotta put them in that environment with you. Do the best you can to make them feel like, it's like, "Wow, I can really visualize this." Um, I mentioned before that the show started that I raced with Boyd James,
Right.
who was on your show, and it's like, I open with, in the devil horse, it's Bronco, or Caballo de Diablo, just having basically my teeth getting rattled out, fillings getting rattled out of my teeth going across this rocky riverbed near San Javier. It's like, I'm like, holy, and that was I mean, it's easy to write because it's like, I'm just like, holy man, this guy's so calm before he gets behind the wheel. I'm hanging on for dear life, trying to keep track of my road book and, watch the gauges and the GPS and look for traffic. And
And he's a madman back there behind the wheel.
I could barely, he was very calm. No, he's like super calm. He just, yeah. And that's why he's like, I think, won more class wins in the ORMHOF 1000 than anybody else. He's just consistent
Right.
and calm. So anyway, the writing, going back to the writing, it was my least best subject. And so really, I worked really hard. And I look back at some of the early stuff. And I've talked to other editors that I worked for back then. And they're like, yeah, your stuff was pretty rough back then. Like, I look back on it now and I read it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Like, but I was doing the best I could. I'll probably look back in 20 years on the stuff I'm writing now and like, wow, that's so amateur.
You know what? If it tells the story and people can share your feelings from reading it, that's what matters.
Very true. Yeah, very true. And you've been a publisher and editor for years. So yeah, as you know, it's about telling the story.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of those stories. You've traveled to all the 7 continents.
I have. Yeah.
And you've got to wheel them all.
I have. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's been quite a ride, Rich. When I started doing domestic stuff, and then around 2005, I was like, you know what? I've been seeing, different articles or different events in different places. I'm like, the Outback Challenge, I want to do that. So I booked a ticket, and I reached out to the 3 companies that were sponsoring the event: ARB, Warren, Peter Goodrich, and it was 2005. It might have been earlier than that. Anyway, DF Goodrich blew me off. Like, I don't know who you are. Warren blew me off, and Jim Jackson, the ARB, is like, I was just looking for like a third of the airfare to get covered by each of them. Jim Jackson was like, yeah, we'll do that. Not a problem. I was like, wow, thank you. But what I had been doing, because I was at the SEMA show around 2000, and I bumped into a Russian guy accidentally, got in front of his photo, and I apologized, and he goes, oh no, no problem. And I was like, where are you from? And he reaches his hand out, shake mine, and he goes, Andre, edited the 4x4 magazine Moscow.
Oh yes, Andre.
And dude, I'm telling you, the light clicked on for me. And I was like, we should talk. And I spent the next many years hard at finding every off-road magazine in every country that would talk to me. And before I knew it, I had 12 and 15 different markets, non-competing, different language, Germany, England, Italy, France, Spain, Netherlands, Denmark, South Africa, Malaysia. So I was tracking down every off-road magazine out there. So by the time I went to this event in the Outback Challenge in Australia, I was able to put that out to like 10 different international publications and the US. That's where that was a great lesson for me, bumping into Andre. And we're still friends.
Right.
After all these years. I mean, got to get into the political stuff, and some of the Russian friends are some of the best people. Um, but yeah, I was able to like, wow. And the other thing is, if you can sell an article once to a magazine in the States, okay, great. But if you can sell it 10 times to people that are different languages and different regions, different demographic markets, it's a win-win. And so the next time I wanted to do another international event, it was much easier because I could provide this, PDFs of all the work to the promoter, or if it was a sponsored event, I'm like, well, this is what I did when I covered the last event. And they look at it, they got 40 pages of print in different places in the world. And if it's an international company, they're just like, oh yeah, absolutely. We want you here. Come on in. It was awesome. Yeah. And that was kind of what I built my business on, Rich, was that that I could go into an event, didn't matter where it was in the world, and I could provide the promoter with way more than they expected. It's a win-win. I got to do some really cool stuff. I got to make enough to pay my bills, and the people that put the event on were able to get some great exposure. And there are not that many people in the world that do that.
True.
Yeah, there's like a small group of a couple, like 4 or 5 journalists that I know, we all know each other. But that was kind of been our gig. Yeah.
We have a guy that writes and does articles for us in Europe, and I know he does the same thing that you're doing. You probably the name escapes me because Shelley deals with him all the time, but
is it Jerome Andre?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's another guy named Fred Krugsman who does it as well. Yeah, it's like the small circle.
Yes. And he it's great getting stuff from Europe in the magazine. And it's and for him it's great because he's getting an outlet in the United States now.
Yeah.
Besides, actual print. So So then let's talk about some of those trips and things that happened on them. Like you were talking about, I know that you've done the Outback Challenge, and you've done a couple of those type of scenario events. What was the coolest thing about that? About any of those type events?
Well, one, I mean, obviously, I like the competition side of it. I like the adventure side of it. Usually, when I go into cover an event, one, I did the event. Like I covered the Australasian Safari a number of times out in Perth. Covered the Moroccan Outback Challenge, the car rally, a lot of Mexico stuff. But like for example, when I went to Morocco for the Outback Challenge, once I'm in country, there's one part of the business that this is the multitasking side. One is covering the off-road event and having markets for it. The next is everything else that goes on in Morocco. So the other thing that I learned is like, if you happen to like sport fishing, it's like, what's more exotic than sport fishing off the coast of Morocco for a U.S. magazine? Or traveling with a 20th generation Sahrawi nomad, through Chicago on the Algerian border, like the adventure side of it. So that's what I did. I was always stay on for a couple extra weeks in the country and figure out how to get a vehicle. And then I would take off and do, the adventure stuff. So usually solo. So, I mean, once you spend all the time and energy to get somewhere, it's like, for me, it's like, plus I love traveling. I love going into third world markets, and eating street food, finding out what the locals are doing, or traveling some just remote dirt road, stopping in a village, and you're always like a Martian landing in their village, because they're like, well, we don't get Americans here, we don't get white people, we don't get anybody, nobody comes here. What are you doing here? I remember I was in Zambia, and um, I was going from Lusaka to the South Luangwa area. Hummer had given me an H3 for a couple months uh, to do this Hummer Africa expedition. And I had been warned, don't drive down the Lusaka Highway at night because it's bad. There are people walking the road, you're going to see dead bodies. It's like, and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. Well, I decided to drive it at night, and they were spot on correct. I was like, and, cars, drunk drivers, cars coming across the road just about taking you out. I pulled over, and I was like, I used this program called T4A, or Tracks for Africa, and I found this little thin line that looked like it cut off, two sides of the triangle I was trying to drive around. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go find that road. Took me into some of the most remote Africa that I've been in. I mean, just a bumpy goat track for 50 miles through the bush. And the people that live out there, they do not expect you to come in slowly, and I'm just poking along, but into the headlights, an old man on a bicycle with a goat draped over the back of it. You'll see like little lights from the rondevals and little fires out in the bush. The rondeval is kind of like a teepee. It's made out of branches, and they pack elephant dung around it for insulation.
Okay.
And yeah, so I ended up like on this most remote road in the middle of the night, and I finally pulled over. I'm like clearing. I'm like, oh, this looks like a good place to, I think I'm alone. Yeah, looking around. Okay. Set up the tent. All of a sudden, big light from across, from 50 yards away in the bush, lights up like a dozen rondevals. And there's a few people standing there, and somebody had thrown like some paraffin on them, with some paraffin on fire. And I was like, okay, I'm not alone. And I mean, yeah, it's just, but those people were wonderful. They were basically letting me know that somebody was there. I slept great. I woke up in the morning. I had a whole bunch of new friends. They came over. They want to know what's this Mazunga, or which this white guy doing here in our village, and this crazy red Hummer with all these stickers on it. But those are the kind of experiences that I keep with me. That type of thing. Yeah, because
So,
the people, you can see tons of waterfalls and beautiful. I mean, to Victoria Falls and then the classified Zambezi River, the Iguazu Falls in South America. There's lots of beautiful waterfalls, but the people are what you actually really, really remember.
right. I haven't done extensive travel like that. I've been to Japan and Australia, Mexico, Canada, but that's pretty much the extent of it. But in any of those, it's always been the people experiences that
Yeah.
that make me want to go back.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah. And even Japan's a place I haven't been. I'd love to go sometime. But the depth of culture in places like that, different than the middle of Zambia for sure. But you know, but unique and to their own.
have you? Where was the place that you've traveled that you didn't know if you were going to make it back from? Was there
Uh,
ever an instance where you thought, okay, this might be the last day, or the
mm,
next hour might be my last hour?
yeah. 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 Um, I'm historically an optimist, so I really don't look at the end. Um, it'll happen someday, but I never look at it. And yeah, but I have had some moments. I mean, when I was in this covering this event in Morocco, that would have been 2008, and the media car that I was in the back as pastor, was a previous race car. It had no seatbelts. Um, no cage. They pulled the seatbelts and harnesses and the cage and all this stuff out, and it still ran, so they used it. It's Morocco, and I was like, you know what? I would like to get in one of those other media cars because they had some like normal SUVs they were driving. And this one of those events. You fly in, you find the event, and then you're kind of at their mercy, you know, for the next 5 or 6, 7 days. And yeah, they're French Moroccans, and they were very condescending. And they're just like, oh, yeah, this is fine. Everything is fine. You don't need. And I mentioned again, I said, you know what? I'm not comfortable in this car. I would like to get in another car. And I heard him talking to all the other guys, like, oh, American is afraid. He's a that, you know. And I was like, bastards. Well, I'm sitting in the back, middle of the night, heading to the bivouac, desert roads, windy desert roads, stuff on one side, stuff on the other, and downs, and just very terrain. All of a sudden, we just start veering off the road. And I heard the driver say something, but I don't speak French. I don't understand French. So I didn't know what he said. But what he said is no steering.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. So we were exceptionally lucky because where that happened, there was an open range field on the left, and I was behind the driver. And there was like a 45-degree embankment on the right-hand side, on the passenger side. And we headed straight for that embankment. We hit it, and it shot us up, and we did a double barrel roll down the road. And I was hanging on for everything I had. I mean, I was the whole time we were driving, I was looking over the driver's shoulder because I had a bad feeling. I had a gut feeling. And it's not the first time. And I always listen to my gut. And I had my hand on the oh shit bar up, you know, on the handle. You have to bleep that out.
no,
And
it's
sure
all
enough,
good.
like I was wide awake and watching when we hit that embankment. I held on. I was like, I'm not flying out of this car. I just held on and curled up in a ball that I could, and we finally stopped rolling, my side up, and everybody survived. The French kid that was on the other side of the car, he broke his right arm. We had a hard time finding him first, and then my whole left side, I tore my left rotator cuff and had some pretty good lacerations on one side. The other once, you know, we stopped rolling, got out. I'm like, okay, I don't lie. This is good news. You know, so that was a moment. The other time was in Argentina, and I keep a vehicle in South America, and my wife and I were traveling from Cusco, in Peru, heading to Buenos Aires. We went down through Chile, and we were coming over the most northern pass of Argentina, called San Pedro de Atacama. And while we were in Puno, which is where Lake Titicaca is, we stayed at a B&B, and we ate something bad. My wife got sick. The next day, I got sick. And after I got sick, I mean, I was just like heaving up, with barfing on my shoes in the middle of the street with diarrhea. It just like hit you, you know, nothing you could do. You know, bad food. But my stomach hurt for like I pulled a muscle after that. And I was like, oh, man, I pulled a muscle. After I stopped throwing up and I felt better. But it just kind of lingered on until we actually finally crossed over into Argentina. And it was like, then I realized, like, you know what, this is not a pulled muscle. We got to get to a town. This is bad. You know, we got to a town, night, got a room on the side of the, you know, side of the road, little hotel. And my wife went out to get something, and that's when my appendix ruptured.
Oh,
And she
wow.
came back, and I was like laying on the floor in the most pain I think I'd ever been in. Just literally crying like a baby and just curled up in a ball and felt like somebody was sticking a hot pitchfork in my stomach and just jamming it around. And she ran out to the front desk. It's a small town. They didn't have a hospital. They had a clinic. You know, so the Buckport ambulance comes over and like loads me in and takes me to the clinic. They stab me with morphine, which I was ever so happy about. I was like, oh my God, thank you. Oh, I love you. I love you.
No more pain.
Yes. I sing Sunshine and Daisies and ice cream. Yeah. So they just started pressing on my stomach, and you know, my Spanish is limited. It's okay, but basically it's appendices. I'm like, crap. So it was 4 hours to a hospital. They called ahead. I was not getting back in the Buckport ambulance. My wife drove me through the night to this hospital. I took one for the road on the morphine. I was like, hey, you know, I get one of these for the road because it's 4 hours. I need it. And, you know, I get there. They came to the same conclusion. And this is not like an American hospital. There's two medical systems in Argentina. One is pay to play, modern hospitals, and the other is the one that the peasants that drag a steel plow behind a mule. That's the one they go to. I was in the public hospital. So sand dunes going down the hallways, electrical plugs hanging out of the wall on wires, that type of thing. I mean, it was better than the hospital in Morocco, but not much. But the bottom line is like I was just like, I have a medical evac service that I pay for, called Ripcord or Red Point, and they were on the phone to the hospital. They were on the phone. I mean, like barrage of questions and information. And my wife talking to him, and it's like, listen, we can get you to Buenos Aires in 24 hours, but based on the timing, we're not sure you have 24 hours because it had ruptured and it had already been. I mean, it was like full blown rupture.
Right. So then
apparently,
peritonitis
your
sets
body
in, and
exactly, yeah. So I was like, okay, we're doing it here. Let's go. And they rolled me into surgery, and that's a whole another that's another story. Oh God, they rolled me into. Okay, I'm going to tell you since we're talking. They rolled me into surgery. It goes from the sand dunes in the Hall Hospital through a little window to another gurney into a room that looks fairly modern. It's dark, but there's all kinds of machines with flashing lights and monitors and stethoscopes and big bright light over this table, and they slide me on the table. And I'm like, okay, I feel a little bit better about this. But
he whips out the Ginsu.
yeah, he starts sharpening it with a big steel, like they got from the cafeteria. Yeah, but no, so they didn't put me out. They gave me an epidural, so I'm awake. Yeah, and they put this little privacy screen up so I can't see them like cutting my stomach open. It's not like arthroscopic like they do here. It's just like let's cut them open and find it. But so I'm laying there. For my first thoughts, Rich, are that, oh my God, where is my cell phone? I don't have a camera with me. Like I wanted to video what they were doing.
Yeah, since I'm awake, I just put my hand up over the top, right?
Well, I would have done that. I was like, I don't have my phone. I don't have any camera. It's like I couldn't take a picture. Couldn't do any video. But there was a window, like a two-way mirror maybe on the wall, and I could see what they were doing. And so I'm watching in this mirror, this window reflection, and Christian one of them pulls out this book. They're having this conversation in rapid fire Spanish. I'm not catching any of it. They pull out this book. It looks like a Chilton's auto manual. Dude, and they start, Espospo, which means, is this it? Is this it? And they're pointing at my stomach, and I'm like, hey!
It's a roadmap for the internal roadmap medicine book for the
started getting nervous. I'm just like, yes, exactly, yeah. Appendix surgery for dummies, right? I was a little bit, I was a little bit nervous at the moment, but I'm just like, holy crap! I hope they find, know what they were looking for. Unfortunately, it's like, and the doctor, there was one doctor there. He was the doctor, he was the surgeon, he was like everything, Dr. Booth, and he was amazing. I was so humbled by the fact that, they bring you in, stupid tourist that comes down there, gets sick, they bring you in, public medical system, no charge, even for stupid tourists that come into their country and get sick. And I was like, because I asked my wife, like, you got to go figure out the medical side, how we're going to pay for this. And the girl at the counter was like, no, go at this, it's free. I'm like, what? Yep. And that's when I learned about the Argentinian medical system. So it kept me alive. I will forever be grateful and humbled by their graciousness and their help and the help of like local people when I got out, and that helped my wife, because there was a metal chair in the corner of my room. I was there for 6 days. They don't bring you food. No, that's family. Family does that.
Oh, wow.
It's like a zero service hospital. As far as that, what they do medical. They keep you alive. That's it. Your family brings you food. I had friends of friends call people that they knew in Argentina in the area. They brought my wife food. I couldn't eat anything. They wouldn't let me eat or drink anything for 6 days. Like I couldn't even put water in my mouth to wash it out. It was horrible.
Wow.
I had a breath like an iguana. Yeah. But yeah, so that was a long story for 2 moments in my life that I was, concerned. Yeah.
Okay.
There's been some others, but those come to the forefront.
What about your Expedition 7 trip across the Antarctic? What was that like?
Yeah. Well, it was like if I would have had an appendicitis there, or anybody would have had an appendicitis on that trip, you're dead. You're just going back in a body bag.
Right.
Because there is no help. Yeah, in fact, I think if you work down there, you're actually required to have your appendix taken out. That's the one thing that I think we should have as like voluntary surgery. You're sailing around the world, like get rid of the thing. It doesn't do that much anyway. So Antarctica was awesome. There were 7 legs of that project. That's when I was at Overland Journal. And when it began, it was Greg Miller, and who has the Land Cruiser Museum, long time photo guy, and Scott Brady, who's my publisher. And I had done a lot of traveling. I'd kind of done a lot of the routes that they were planning on doing. But when it started, it was like, if there was one leg that I want to do, it's Antarctica. Because that's kind of the unobtainium. Super expensive to get there, super expensive to travel. There's no like public transit system that way. Most people can go to McMurdo, and there's a flight, C-130, I think, that flies into the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station twice a week with supplies. That's how most people get there. But we went to Cape Town because the last leg was Africa. So they went from Durban west across into Namibia and then south into Cape Town. So we flew from Cape Town to Novo Station, which is a Russian air base on the eastern hemisphere, eastern side of the continent, and met up with the guys, a guy named Beasley Arctic Trucks. Awesome guys, awesome equipment, super cool company, great people. And one of the vehicles we flew in the back of this cargo plane that we were in. And they don't have an airport there. I mean, they have an airport, but they don't have one that most people would think of it as an airport. I wanted to kind of get up with the pilot so I could watch, or they had a window, like a bubble, almost like a gunner's bubble up front, down below. And I talked to our logistics person, and she was like, no, they won't let you up there. I was like, I'd just like to see the runway. She goes, well, and she's Russian, and she's like, it is it's all ice, and I knew that, and it's not exactly straight, and it's not exactly level. It's kind of like a worm, but the pilots, they have some vodka before they get ready to land, so they're always very, very relaxed.
They tell you this after you're in the air.
Oh no, we're like that flight. They don't take off unless they think they have a weather window, because once you get halfway across, you can't go back. You're going to land that plane in Antarctica, whatever the weather's like. So it's one of those things where you're on call when they fly down there like once a week or something, usually, but it's not a schedule. It's like you get a call, basically, it's all right, be at the airport and wheels up in 3 hours. So then everybody that's supposed to go on the flight gets to the airport. Yeah.
Wow.
Because it's all based on the weather. If the weather closes in, you better hope that the guys drink a lot of vodka.
So he's really relaxed.
Yes. Yeah. Don't worry about that wind shear or any of that stuff. Just put her down. But yeah, the whole expedition was one of the most memorable. I will always be grateful I was part of that. We started in Novo. Basically, the idea was we're going to go to the South Pole at 2,400 kilometers, and that's climbing from basically sea level up the Antarctic plateau. which is ranges between 8 and 11,000 feet. And once you get on the plateau, it's pretty flat. I mean, there's what they call Startuki, which is like the catabolic winds just cut the ice up and make all these ice sculptures and stuff. But the ice up there doesn't shift that much. Where it shifts and where it's dangerous is coming up the ice flows on and off of the plateau. So, coming up all the glacier fields, getting up on the plateau, that was one of the most spectacular views I've ever seen. And it just kept coming at us because we were traveling for days. Even though there was no night because it's 24/7 daylight. It was just spectacular. But you definitely, when we were out of the vehicle, I mean, you're supposed to be roped up all the time with a climbing harness and a tether. But there were times where it's like, maybe I'm dumb, but I'm like, I'm disconnecting. I got to be up there, you guys. We are the subject right here. We are the photo right here. I got to be up on top of that hill. And so I'd grab my ice pole and just start, hiking. Did I get lucky? Yeah. Better lucky than good sometimes,
Right.
But yeah, so the plan originally was we were going to drive for 20 hours, 2 vehicles, 4 men, rotate shifts driving every 4 hours, every 2 hours, whenever we decided to swap. 20 hours of driving, and then we'd have a 10-hour rest period, basically set up the Arctic oven tent. We made water from ice. We prepared food. We slept. And then, basically step and repeat. You do that, do that the next so-called day until we got to the South Pole. Actually, we had a little detour because we were in Antarctica, based on the Antarctic Treaty, is you can't just go down there on your own. You've got to have some type of a support or somebody that can help you, whether it's a plane that you've got scheduled to fly in and whatever. So there was one other expedition on the continent, on that hemisphere, that season, and that was walking with the wounded, which was a collaborative effort between Australia, New Zealand, United States, Great Britain, for wounded soldiers. And like Prince Harry was their patron on the whole project. So we got a call from them on the South phone that they were hunkered down in a whiteout, and some of their guys were getting frostbite. So we deviated. I think they were at 88 south, and we were on the approach. So we deviated towards their position, and when we finally got to them, we basically helped them load up their camp, and we transported them down to 89 south, so 1 degree south, and then they were going to, continue on there to the South Pole. So a whole nother group of people that were so inspirational. We had a couple of guys in, a Brit and a Scot. They're both amputees. They call it a BK, or below the knee. And just funnier than the barrel of monkeys, man. To get in, these guys were just so fun to ride with. We had a dual cab Toyota 6x6. Yeah, they're great. Had all kinds of stories about Scotch and you name it.
Pretty awesome. And how long was that journey?
Well, we were in the ice for 3 weeks.
Okay.
So the plan was to go to the South Pole, and there's the ceremonial South Pole. There's also the Amundsen South Pole Station, and it is a massive complex. It's like Space Odyssey 2000. What was that movie? 2002, maybe.
2001: Space Odyssey. Yeah.
Yes, but it was like super sized, enough that it could house like 230 people. And greenhouses, basketball courts. I mean, hospital, you name it. I mean, it was a massive complex. But we got there. We were kind of pushing because we really wanted to go all the way across to a full crossing to the Ross Ice Shelf. And if we got to South Pole Station in time, because we had to, whatever we did, we had to backtrack. We had to get back to Novo because there was only one flight leaving the continent. It was the end of the season. and the only people that were getting off the continent were going to be on that plane. So it was like we were kind of had to push hard, but we got to South Pole Station. We did our thing. We took a little tour. Greg family owns the Utah Jazz. He gave the director some shirts and some swag, and we're like, okay, gotta go. And we like headed towards the Ross Ice Shelf, like just pushing, and which is about another 500 kilometers maybe. Another incredible glacier field, a whole bit. But on that side, that goes to McMurdo, and they actually run a fuel train in twice a year. And we ran into the fuel train. So they actually have kind of an established, it's warm because this was the first train of the season, but a whole bunch of heavy equipment on tracks. They drag these these big groups of like 10, 8,000 liter bladders of diesel fuel. So they're like a fuel train. They're bringing supplies in. So we made it down to the Ross Ice Shelf. We had a rest period. Drank, when we got to the South Pole, the first time I opened a bottle of this Shackleton scotch that I had. So we had a drink, a couple drams, said, hey, we're here, we made it. All right, now we got another 3,000 kilometers back to catch that plane. So we repeated the whole thing. Yeah. But, overall, just absolutely stunning area. I was really entranced with Antarctica, and I'd like to go back. I'd like to set up a tent in the emperor penguin colony. Probably a smelly place, but from the photographer's side of me, that's another thing. That's a place I'd like to go back to.
Cool. Very cool. So then let's talk
about... It was very cool. It was cold.
Yeah.
Like we were sleeping in tents. It was 40 below.
Yeah, that's a bit cold. I did negative 31 once, but that was in Montana. Yeah,
it was fine. We had there's no, it's old saying, there's no bad equipment, there's just bad clothing.
Right.
So we had everything. I mean, I was the primary photographer and videographer, so I was out of the vehicle a lot. Setting up shots and but just had to be very mindful. Like I had 3 layers of gloves on it, but my big, ultra low temp gloves, and then I had a secondary layer of that, and then inside that I had like a North Face E-tip gloves that I could work the camera controls with. But when it was cold, I could only get away with maybe 60, 75 seconds before I had to throw my hands back in my gloves and under my armpits and try to warm them up. It was cold.
Wow.
Yeah, especially with the wind.
Yeah, the wind really it cuts.
It does.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about Overland Journal and you were on the ground floor of that, weren't you?
No, I was not. No,
oh, okay.
No, I was the second editor.
Right.
So it started actually around 2002 or 2003. I did a 3-part series on traveling in Mexico for one of the magazines. And a reader sent in a letter that was just like, man, this is awesome. I want to be in touch with this guy. And I'm trying to remember, Rich, which magazine it was, whether it was Four Wheeler or Four Wheel and Sport Utility. I don't remember. But anyway, the editor forwarded me the email. And I called the guy. His name was Scott Brady. And, we talked. He's like, yeah, this is like totally the thing I want to get into. And, I've like read your stuff on, traveling and overland stuff. I'm like, okay, all right, great. Thanks. Appreciate the good words and blah, blah, blah. And then he called me a couple years later. He's like, hey, I'm starting this website called Expedition Portal. And I was like, oh, okay, awesome. He's like, yeah, if you want to send some stuff our way, I'm like, yeah, that'd be cool. Do you guys have a budget? He's like, no, we don't have any money. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I do have to make a living. And then a couple of years later, 2007, he was like, hey, Chris, I ran into him, SEMA or whatnot, but he's like, we're starting the magazines. And I said, really? And for those in the industry, it's like, I remember like Prime Media had just like slashed a bunch of magazines. They had just laid a whole bunch of people off. It was like, it was a rough time for publishing. And I mentioned that, and he's like, yeah, it's going to be different. It's like completely different. Can you give me $60 for a subscription? And I'm like, sure. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I got my charter subscription to Overland Journal. And then I guess around 2010, the end of 2010, he caught up with me at the SEMA show. And I had sent them a couple of articles. And he caught up with me at the SEMA show. And he said, just asked if, he said there might be some changes happening with the magazine and if I would consider being the editor. And, I was like, huh, interesting. Let me think about it. So, they flew me down to Prescott, a few months later, and we talked. And it was one of those things, Rich. I was at this point in my life and my career where, because I wasn't going to pay diddly squat as an editor, from an industry standard. But it was like, you know what? I've been on the contributing side for more than a decade. This will be fun. It'll be a good chapter. I'll figure out, I'll run a magazine and really had to fine tune my English skills at that point. But it was a good chapter. I appreciated it because, I had 100% latitude when we'd have content meetings, but I had 100% latitude and responsibility. It was good. I've got to hunt down some super interesting contributors with, stories, that stuff from all over the world. I started doing some really high tech, involved gear testing. Everything from LED lights and testing them at a lab that made surgical headlamps. So like they're dead on everything, industry standard tests. And it was good. It ran its course. I left in, 2018, about 5 years ago, just to kind of jump. I was a contract editor, so I continued to actually do all that other stuff, like the international events and travel. And so it was a good scenario because I wasn't a W-2 employee. It was like I was a contractor. It's like this is something that I identified with, but I still had the latitude to do all the other stuff. And, my commercial work with auto manufacturers and stuff like that, which allowed me, that type of stuff allowed me to the financial latitude to be the editor. So it's great.
Perfect. And at what point in your life did Susie come into?
I met Susie, and everybody's listening, so we all know each other pretty well, on the best day of my life.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah, best thing that ever happened. It was Halloween. It was Halloween 2001. Country dance costume contest. I'd just come back from Australia. It's been a month down there, and I was like, I had a roommate. I was like, I have nothing. I don't have anything to wear a costume. I'll tell you, And my roommate Sean was like, dude, just go to your closet. I mean, just put your pants, your shirt, your hat on. You look like Steve Irwin. And I'd actually just met Steve Irwin while I was in there, on that last trip. It is, that's another whole other story, but at his zoo. Just happened to camp up the road from his neighbors. Anyway, so I met Susie at a country dance. I say people like, I picked her up at a bar, but it was a country dance, and I was Steve Irwin, and I won the contest. They had you up on the stage, and they had a bunch of guys like really elaborate costumes, like Dracula and all this stuff. And the guy with the mic the MC was like, okay, tell us your name and what you are. He's like, I'm Bob. I'm Dracula. But all these guys are pathetic. And by the time I was like the last one, by the time he got to me, I just grabbed the mic, and I had got this big rubber snake around my neck and a crocodile on my hat, and I was playing the part in shorts, and the stuff I've been wearing for years, right? People thought like Overland Journal and fitted khaki. It's like, I don't wear this. I pictured myself in South America in the 90s, wearing the same big pockety pants. Anyway, I grabbed the mic. I was like, oh, everybody, my name's Steve. You might know I got a show on the telly. And just went off on my horrible Aussie accent. So my Australian friends told me. But anyway, yeah, Susie was in the audience, and she condescended to dance with me later. And that was 2001. So yeah, we met in 2001. We got engaged in New Zealand on a glacier, hired a ski plane, and flew up and proposed to her. She's a smart girl. She said yes. It was a long walk down the hill. So you got to think about that stuff when you're going to post. There's got to be there's no way out if they say, it's going to be a very long and awkward trip back if they say no.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but Susie's great. I mean, it's a partnership. I mean, she's independent. She allows. I mean, anybody that would, when I bring up 2 months in Africa, driving a Hummer through 12 different countries for my wife. I've never been with a woman like that before. They would say, "Oh, you have to do that. That's a great opportunity." Yeah, you definitely have to do that. Other women I've been with, girlfriends and whatnot, would be like, "You're going to leave me alone for 2 months?" And so she's independent. We trust each other. We kind of understand each other. So, and she's like been very supportive of all the crazy wild ass stuff that I've done.
That's awesome. And she's got to participate in some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not that kind of guy, Rich.
Yeah.
It's like, so one of the cool things is that, when I travel a lot, I get a lot of frequent flyer miles. And so I went to Australia covering an event. She flew in afterwards and we met in Melbourne, and I borrowed a rig from ARB for a couple of weeks. So that, and actually after that Morocco rollover and all that fiasco, I didn't go home. I actually stayed because I was like, I got 2 more weeks in Morocco and 2 more weeks in Europe with my wife. Like, I'm just going to take whatever antibiotics I need to deal with this, road rash that I've got. And so after I got to know that, we met in Barcelona, borrowed a Land Rover from a friend and spent some time in Spain and in France. So she's definitely included. Yeah, always.
Excellent.
Finished up a project in London, and we actually did it twice, once in kind of Western Great Britain and then another time in Scotland. So
cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Happy wife, happy life, dude.
Yep, absolutely. So then the last thing I really want to talk about is the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. And the person that nominated you was Mark Smith?
It was, yeah. Mark nominated me.
And you're a 2015 inductee. I want to say congratulations on that. I know I've told you that a couple of times, but
thank you.
To me, ORMHOF has always been really special to me, and even more so now. How about that? What was it like that night of your induction?
It's pretty surreal. When Mark nominated me, he would call and we'd have lunch every once in a while, up in Georgetown. After, of course, I was at DPS, but he nominated me. It's like, Mark, I'm like, it's not my time. I'm like, I'm just a snot-nosed kid in this group. I mean, let's see. So I was in my 50s, but I'm still, compared to the people who work around and with, and these people in the industry, I'm like, I'm just a new guy. It's like, there's so many people that should be there before me, even if I was deserving of it. And Mark's pretty no gloves kind of guy. And he's like, God damn it, Chris. He nominated me, and then Rod Hall kind of carried that torch on after Mark passed, and I will be super grateful. I still, it's still kind of surreal. So I still just feel like, I'm just a normal guy doing my thing, and there's so many other people that I feel, people that I know, have become friends with, but people I looked up to. I mean, my category was pioneering journalism, but there's it's a huge honor. I mean, have I've done work with the Hall of Fame since on different projects, and actually even when Rod Hall brought it back around 2000, he I met him on a project, and he called. He's like, Chris, Rod Hall. He goes, well, I'm putting this Hall of Fame thing back together. We got an induction ceremony up here in Reno, and we need a photographer, and I got no money. And he's like, can you help us out? And I was like, yeah, I think that would be awesome. Sure, of course. So that was the year that I think that Ivan Stewart got inducted, and a few others. I don't know the others, but yeah. So super honor. I mean, still, I look at that wall with everybody's pictures on. I'm like, I see my picture, and I'm like, really? I'm like, what is that guy doing up there? But it's humbling. It's humbling because that's an awesome organization. There are great people that are running it, and super. Everybody is super appreciative and thankful that Rod, had the intestinal fortitude and guts to bring it out of hibernation, and through his efforts, and that of Mark McMillan and the board, and Barbara Rainey, and Jen Hellstrom. It's like, right. Man, I mean, the induction ceremony is like, it's Hollywood now. It's amazing.
It sure is. It is absolutely amazing. And anybody that's listening to this, if you've never been to an ORMHOF induction, that's Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame, you need to it needs to be something that you do, bucket list, life list, whatever, whether anybody in the hall or not, you can get tickets to the induction dinner and the gala and everything that happens around it that evening, and it's phenomenal. It really is. And it's great for our industry, off-road in general. The four-wheel drive side of it is starting to be recognized more and more and more, and it's just it's something that's dear to my heart, that's for sure. And
yeah,
it's every time somebody I know gets inducted, I've got a tear in my eye because I know them, and to hear their story and know their story. I was there when you got yours, and it's just it's just so cool. It really is.
Yeah, great organization. What you said about the induction ceremony and the crowd, it's like it is absolutely the who's who in motorsports, off-road motorsports. I mean, the people that we've seen there, Rich, like from the Myers brothers to Malcolm Smith, and Walker, and Ivan Stewart, and Jim Fricker, Rod's Rod Hall's navigator for decades, and these guys are the OGs, and some of them are still around, and they show up, and it's like such an honor to go to that event.
And that's one of the cool things now that I've been doing the ORMHOF inductees, is getting a chance to not just know the name, but to know the people. And the Vic Wilsons and the Brian Chichuas, and Bob Ham, and just everybody. You said Sue Mead. It's just incredible to hear those stories and everything that they've done. And the amount of history and stuff. So it's quite the organization.
Yeah, and so much fun, because you mentioned Brian Chichu. It's like all these guys that we talk about, like the first Nora Mexican 1000 67. It's like I don't know how old you are, Rich, but I was 4, and these guys were adults, and they were out there doing it. So it's like we grew up watching so many of these folks. They're iconic, the front runners of the industry, and their names have become synonymous with the pioneering days of off-road racing.
Right.
So pretty cool.
Yep.
And just like in the rock racing side, it definitely, it's one of the things I think ORMHOF has done, and it's really pushed and getting in the right direction is, there's like, um, what are we going to be? What are we going to be? Are we the off-road racing motorsports Hall of Fame, or are we the off-road motorsports Hall of Fame? Whether it's become into new categories, whether they're adventure categories or, short course or rock racing. I mean, Shannon was, inducted a couple of years ago. We're getting more and more of that. So they're really looking outside of the Baja Desert Racing crowd, and yeah, getting much more diversified. And back when Rod brought it back, I was like, Rod, he was trying to grow it. And I said, I have a lot of contacts with offshore magazines, but I don't know that ORMHOF is ready for that. You got to really decide. The board of directors need to decide who the organization is and what they're going to represent, and if they can expand like that and still do justice to somebody in that's the world's best rally driver from France or Spain, compared to one of our guys who's amazing.
Right.
So anyway, got off a little bit on sidetrack here, but
No. It's all
being
part
inducted
of it.
is being inducted is super cool, and I've made sure that I'm there back every year for the induction ceremony, and they give me this little medallion that I gotta wear. It's like identifier. It's like, wow, really, I'm one of those cool. I get to hang out with the cool kids.
That's true. There's only I think this year it's somewhere like 130 something now.
It's 100, 120 maybe.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty cool club. It's a very cool club. And I think, and the one thing about ORMHOF is that they're not, what I've realized in the last years is that being inducted is not necessarily about your trophy room. It can have a huge impact, but it's about all the other stuff. It's how other people in the industry look at you, because they've got a selection committee that is super diverse, and how does the rest of the industry look at you? What have you been doing besides your business side of it? And obviously, we're all in the business of some type of motorsport. But what other things do you do? It's like like Cameron Steele with all of his orphanage work in Baja, right? And which jumps off the coattails of all of like Malcolm Smith's orphanage work and these other guys that they're giving back. That's kind of a coined phrase, but it's like they genuinely care about people and the places they travel and the people that live there.
Right.
And it's like that, I think, is the other thing that really brings a lot to the table for some of these guys that, some of the folks that have been inducted. Like they represent the industry to the best that it can be represented. They're ambassadors. Where you might have somebody that has just a crudload of trophies, but they're a complete jerk, and people think they're dishonest, and they really don't care about anything but winning the next race. And it's like, I don't know, is that Hall of Fame stuff?
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
They got a great.
It's cream of the crop. It really is.
Yeah. So I'm humbled, and I appreciate you bringing that up. It's not something I wear around with a big hat that says I'm Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame inductee, but it's definitely humbling. Definitely something I can be proud of. So I like that.
Last but not least, let's talk about what you got coming up here in a couple of weeks.
Couple weeks. Let's see, which one? Talking about Sierra Trek?
Yeah, Sierra Trek.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've been to the event. For those that are listening that haven't been to the event, Sierra Trek is, I guess you could compare it to a Jeepers Jamboree a little bit. So it's kind of like it's on the Fordyce Trail. It's a sister trail to the Rubicon, and it's big event. They get 700, 800 people there usually every year. Hardcore trail, but it's not so much about the hardcore trail anymore, because they got like a dozen different trail rides, and meals, and a band, and campfire, and it's been going on since 1967. So that's pretty cool. It's like 56th annual. I've been involved with it since 1984. So
okay.
I joined Yeah, I joined a club, local Sacramento club, called the Sierra Treasure Hunters, and they were one of the three clubs that actually started the event in '67. Uh, Sac Cheapers, Community City Broncos, and Sierra Treasure Hunters. So I just kind of happened to bump into the right guys at the Denny's parking lot 40 years ago, or 39 years ago. And yeah, so I've been involved at all levels. But I lead so there's 4 days trail rides or 3 days trail rides. So I kick it off on Thursday. So I lead the Fort Ice Trail run, which goes from Cisco Grove or Eagle Lakes area back to Meadow Lake, which is the old 7,300-foot location of Summit City, which is an 1862 mining town. Kind of a boom or bust, more the latter than the former mining town.
Right.
But it's super fun. I always look forward to it. We're actually heading up tomorrow, since we are it's our work party weekend, and we set up main camp, a big kitchen, stage. They got a 50-foot dance floor. They got showers. I mean, it's I'm not saying it's high tech, but it's pretty fancy schmancy for the middle of wilderness, semi, what people would think it'd be a wilderness area, but it's public and private land. Yeah, it's fun. And the vehicle I'm driving, you asked me about, the early cars. I'm driving that 1982 Toyota Hilux that I bought in 1983.
Wow.
Still my same rig.
Still
rock
have
rig.
it, huh?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen very often. The people I talk to that
Yeah.
still have their original rig.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I'm surprised because I was on the Rubicon with it within like the first year I had it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to destroy my rig. It's not even paid for yet. And that would have been like 1984. So yeah, I call it my pumpkin truck. Around 1998, the bed had quite a few dents on it. It's original bed, original cab, but it was getting a little bit, not like the blundered stuff you see now, not like the rock buggies you see now, but it had a few dents on it. Anyway, I was like, you know what? I'm going to plagiarize Ned Bacon's idea with his old black truck. So I made a custom flatbed for topside boxes, and and was kind of like the front runners on the flatbeds,
cool.
topside boxes. And I call it my punk kid truck because it's got half doors, and I should look like a punk kid while I'm driving it.
So, what's your next big adventure coming up? What's in the books? What's on the books to do?
Well, that's a really good question. I've worn so many hats, as far as, I've got my media hat, and I do a lot of commercial photography with auto manufacturers as well. But I've had a couple of projects in the works. One of them came to fruition in 2019. That was East West Australia. And that was driving basically from the most eastern point on the continent to the most western point, and mostly dirt roads, and across the northern Simpson Desert that hadn't been crossed in 50 years. So that was a big one. I partnered with my buddy Ben Davidson, the publisher of Cheap Action magazine. And then we had talked about doing another one, kind of a follow-up, north-south Australia. But I got a couple other projects in the works. Not a couple I can't really talk about right now, but exciting stuff on the horizon, international stuff. Yeah.
Well, cool. I hope to read about them and hear about them shortly.
Me too. A lot of times I just can't wait to find out what I'm doing next.
Excellent. Well, Chris, I want to say thank you so much for spending the last 2 hours on the phone with me and talking about your adventures and your life. And I found it fascinating. I really did, and I'm sure others will too. But I'm glad we were able to finally get this one recorded. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Me too. This is a lot of fun, and you've known me for a long time, and I'm usually not wanted to like jump up and stand in a crowd and like, hey, everybody look at me. And then you start asking me questions. I'm just rattling off like it's Chatty Cathy.
I have that way.
I'm like, I got the mic.
It's great. Well, Chris, take care. Say hello to Susie for me, and be healthy and successful, and all that kind of stuff in your next endeavors. And we can't wait to read about them.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on, Rich. Yeah.
And I guess
Always
I'll
fun
see you in
hanging out.
September.
I will see you in September at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
Okay.
All right, buddy.
Talk to you later. Thank you.
All right. Have a great night.
Well, that's another episode of Conversations with Big Rich. I'd like to thank you all for listening. If you could do us a favor and leave us a review on any podcast service that you happen to be listening on, or send us an email or a text message or a Facebook message, and let me know any ideas that you have, or if there's anybody that you have that you think would be a great guest, please forward the contact information to me so that we can try to get them on. And always remember, live life to the fullest. Enjoying life is a must. Follow your dreams and live life with all the gusto you can. Thank you.